And now, our next talk, I am very excited to have M0 on stage to talk more about stablecoin infrastructure. Let's please give him a big round of applause to Joao. Cool. Let me see. I don't know why I went to the end. Can you go back to the beginning? I have to compete with the... Sorry, you announced the refreshments and the snacks right before my presentation. Man, that's hard to compete. All right. And I go forward here, right? Okay. All right, so let's get started then. Hi everyone, my name is Joao Reginatto. I am Chief Strategy Officer at M0. I'll tell about M0 a little bit more in a second, but about me first. Prior to joining M0 about a year ago, I ran the stablecoin product for Circle for 8 years. And so I have some experience in this space. I've built products like USDC, Eurocoin for Circle, and a bunch of stablecoin infrastructure-related products. So I know, maybe I don't know much, but at least I've had experience and I've made a bunch of mistakes and happy to share how I see, mostly personally speaking, the future of this space from an infrastructure point of view and how to go about building some of these things. I think it's always important to start with definitions, right? I think stablecoins is an interesting term. It's not a term that I'm particularly fond of, but you know, we just had Stani and Rune over here talk about USDS, you know, the evolution of the maker ecosystem into Sky. I'm talking a little bit more narrowly about what commonly people name fiat collateralized stablecoins. So you know, digital assets that actually try to represent what a dollar is, but on chain. I think we live in a world where we have seen probably the V1 of these types of products, and I think it's about time for us to learn a few lessons about how these products and or this infrastructure, because I actually believe it can be much more infrastructure in the role that it plays, can look like in the future. I made this joke actually when I attended the event in Brussels. So just put it out here, more of a burn on me, because this, for folks who are not following the elections in the US, this is kind of a play on one of Kamala Harris' quotes. And you know, I do think we need to think about stablecoins in terms of what they can be and not necessarily how they have been developed to date. But you know, just a couple of weeks after I made that joke, she became the actual candidate on the Democrats. So who's laughing now kind of thing. I have a burn. But in any case, I thought we could start this session with just, again, based on some practical experience. How do you actually build a stablecoin? Like, how do you go about building one of these attempts at representing a dollar on chain? It's actually very complicated, but most people simplify perhaps too much. Usually you start with some very base layer, right? People call it collateral or reserves, but you need to have a way to represent the real side of the instrument that you want to eventually represent on chain, and to be able to have some sort of a reserve or a collateral layer. You need to custody these assets. So these are going to be dollars or some representation of the base layer of the dollar, right? Whether they are US treasuries or similar. So you need to be able to custody these things. You need to be able to have a way to manage a portfolio. Usually these assets are represented, again, in some sort of financial instrument, right? Again, they are securities, and you need the classic portfolio management side of things. You need some sort of a investment policy or a composition policy, right? You have to say that, you know, maybe a good representation of the dollar on chain is backed by Bitcoin or is backed by some weird stuff. Like, most people are going to say that that's not a good idea, but you can only define what is and is not a good idea by having a definition of what composes that collateral. On top of that, then usually you have the bit that is a little bit more tech heavy. So you have the actual issuance of these assets. A lot of people call this the primary market, right? So this is actually a stablecoin issuer. It's usually mostly of what this box encompasses. For that, you need to build some technology for actually creating and destroying these assets in digital form in these new blockchain ledgers. You need the capability, the ability to receive payments for these assets, because these businesses, what they do is they face some primary market counterparties, and they need to take a payment to be able to sell stablecoin assets back to them. Because of that, you need to be able to onboard these customers. So again, very traditional kind of trade-looking business. And you need to manage these orders. A lot of these cycles are kind of long-running in nature. You take a payment, you go away, you generate these assets, you give those assets back. So you need to be able to manage that end-to-end flow. I think with time, people realize that you obviously need a good amount of transparency and accountability, and a lot of that, I think, come from kind of third parties as well. First of all, one thing that a lot of people don't think about, but you need sources of truth, the systems of record for saying, how much collateral do we actually have at any point in time? So banks for a long time have played a really important role in kind of stablecoin constructs in the way that they have been built, because they have a bank account with a balance that's usually kind of the source of truth for how much money you actually have at any given point in time. And by the way, that is not I have seen those sources of truth failing, and sometimes the balance that the banks tell you that they have, it's not actually what they have. But in any case, it's not as simple as it seems. You have this idea of attestation. Again, it's a bit of a misnomer in the industry, but you need somebody then that has the ability to look at disparate ledgers, right? The on-chain ledgers, the off-chain ledgers, and kind of compare them and publicize that, and actually say, put their name on the line, right? Put their reputation on the line and say, yeah, these guys have what they say they have. And you need some level of reporting as well. There's a lot of data that's generated by all these flows, and usually it's a good idea to be transparent about those. Then on the top, you actually get the most difficult part of building a stablecoin. All of this part here is, pardon my word, it's super, super easy. Like from here down, it's super, super easy. And part of the reasons why we have so many stablecoins today in this kind of sector is because it's super easy. That top part, that's hard. Not as easy to do that part. Because, for example, the distribution and the secondary markets layer is where you need to create utility for what you're building. Again, as I said, super easy to build a stablecoin, not exactly easy to bring it to market, right? There's a reason why there's one keynote about building a stablecoin and a few others about how to bring it to market. It's much harder to do that. You need to create utility. People need to care. You need people to have demand for it. Especially in a competitive environment, it's very difficult. You need then to have liquidity provisioning. So it's one thing to make people demand your product. It's another thing to actually deliver where they need it and when they need it. That's particularly hard, and particularly hard to do at scale. You need brand awareness. Again, as any other product, money has brand, and people have preferences, and you need to be able to compete in that space. And then you actually get into bits that are much less commoditized from a technology point of view and super hard to build, but you need these instruments, these pieces of infrastructure to be composable, so you actually need to be able to very easily integrate them with other layers of the stack, particularly on the digital, on the blockchain side. And a lot of these products sort of fail on that. You need a level of interoperability. At the end of the day, money is something that benefits a lot from what we call singleness, right? People don't like money that is not interoperable. Maybe a small tribe in the countryside of Africa might be able to live with a very non-interoperable form of money, but in the world that we live today, you want something that is exchangeable for other forms of money. And usually, because it's a competitive environment, this might not be true for all forms of money, but in stablecoins, because we are still in the process of figuring out who's going to win, you need some way of talking about and building incentive mechanisms. Again, Stani and Rune were just talking about the next generation of some of that for DeFi, but that's definitely necessary in this case. That's how you build a stablecoin. Please don't do it. Not like that, at least. That's kind of we're looking backwards. We're looking at how they have been built. I think we should look at how they can be, as Ms. Harris would say. The reason for what I'm saying, you know, let's not build it like that, it's because if I decide to build it, you know, and somebody else decides to build it, and there's many of those here in this conference today, and again and again and again, we keep replicating these instruments, and they're all fundamentally non-interoperable, right? So this is precisely what happened around about late 1700s, early 1800s in a country like the United States. It's exactly the early form of commercial banking before people figured out better ways of doing this, right? So back in the day, you had many, you know, distributed banks, the wildcat banks, as they called it. They would all issue their form of money, their paper notes, and these would all be non-interoperable. But if you actually put them side by side, they would look almost exactly the same. So it's like, but why are they not interoperable? Well, because there was no further infrastructure to make them non-interoperable. And that limits the growth of these sectors, the growth of products that are built on top of this. Is extremely, extremely limiting. We live this phase. We are right here, right now in stablecoin land, right? USDC is not compatible with USDT, which is not compatible with DAI, which is not compatible to anything else. And don't tell me about trading. People tell me like, oh, but you can trade one for the other. Yeah, that's not interoperability. Trading involves price discovery, which means that you can go from 1 unit of one to 0.88 units of the other. That doesn't sound like interoperability to me. So we can do better. I think we have seen already some early improvements in this space. We have seen people consolidating sort of the fundamental layer of these instruments, the reserve layer, and then allowing multiple issuers to be built on top of them. Good examples of these are, you know, Paxos and the stablecoin as a service offering that they have operated for many years. We have other companies attempting to do this, but unfortunately, this becomes the interoperable layer. So the good old dollar or good old, you know, U.S. Treasuries are the interoperable layer. But actually the asset, which has 100% of the benefit, the asset living on this new ledger, which is the blockchain, does not contain that benefit. I still need to go through price discovery, and unfortunately these things are replicating the majority of the stack. So what can it actually look like? You know, it's all a matter of deconstructing this stack and reconstructing it from first principles. But I believe, again, terms and conditions apply, but I believe that what this will look like in the future necessarily goes through models that involve multi-issuance. So, you know, you have these instruments, but they're actually issued by multiple parties, a little bit more resembling the commercial banking system as we know it today. You know, we have a system, and it's an open model, it's a federated model, but it's open, and it's quite, you know, prescriptive in terms of how I can become a new member and I can participate. You know, I can go in and I can apply for a banking charter in any one of these jurisdictions, and it's quite understandable, like the outcome that can have. And the way that this looks more or less, if you reorganize these boxes, is sort of the following, right? You continue to have this underlying base layer for money because we all need this. We live in societies. We collectively believe or don't believe in the value of certain things. So that still remains. But for example, something like, you know, reserve composition and policy, you can sort of push that aside a little bit to a layer that you can, you know, call it federation or governance, right? Which again, if you think about the commercial banking system, that's what a, you know, central bank and policies and regulation would do for you, right? We don't have that for stablecoins today. And I'm far from an advocate of, you know, I hear so much like, we need more regulation, we need more regulation. I would like to switch the word more for better. What we need is better regulation. We don't need more, we have plenty. But we need people thinking about, okay, if this is potentially the new way that you rewrite the commercial banking system, how do you govern this stuff? And there's a lot of, you know, smart things that we can do from a governance point of view. We can actually push things like brand awareness, monetary policy, you know, the way that you engage with these networks, and composition policy, all the way to decide and decide for ourselves as a sector that we will have a layer of governance or regulation. Another thing that we don't have today is a common platform or a public utility where you can actually benefit from you know, commoditized technology, because minting and burning technology for stablecoins today couldn't be more commoditized. You know, pick your flavor of ERC20 smart contract, and it's all in there. People have invented everything that has to be invented. Similarly, for composability, interoperability, things like order management, incentive mechanisms, this is all building blocks that exist, and you don't need to reinvent that every time you build a stablecoin. It's much better to connect to something that is existing. And then you have the primary market and secondary market and transparency, which kind of, we haven't touched so much on. But actually what this kind of model allows you to do is for you to replicate these major components of the stack and allow them to be an open participation entry point into the system, so that you can have multiples of primary markets, multiples of transparency actors, and multiples of reserve collateral composition. And actually there's an even better evolution of this, which is actually you merge sort of the primary and the secondary market, because this addresses a big point that I think there's no answer for that. Even Studi just now have not answered, which is, if you are an independent issuer of a stablecoin today, how do you get to market? How do you find utility? And yes, there's a lot of good advice for how you go and you find that, but actually the best advice is for the utility to actually be a stablecoin issuer. Why do we need to start with the issuer? Why don't we start with the utility? Why does it work when Binance issues their own stablecoin? Because they have the utility, they have the use case, right? And you should start from the use case and then decide that it makes sense for you to also become a stablecoin issuer, not to wake up one day and say, I want to be a stablecoin issuer, and now let me find who's going to want to accept my stablecoin. That's a recipe for failure mostly. And as I said, if you have a model like this, and you can then say, okay, we'll have an open federated model where I'm going to allow a network of participants to join and multiply these kind of main components, I think we have something that resembles a much better potential for the future. So I'll do a little bit of an M0 pitch here quickly at the end. So how do we think this can be achieved? So M0 is an infrastructure that powers what we think is the first open federation of stablecoin issuers. So if you actually had a federation, if you actually had these common infrastructures already built, and if you welcomed stablecoin issuers to participate on the same network and all issue a same fungible asset, wouldn't that be a better version of the world? We think it would. And instead of, again, having stablecoin issuers seek utility, we are the infrastructure, and we are seeking the owners of utility to come in and become stablecoin issuers instead. So the way that this looks is that we have a protocol, we have built a governance mechanism, and we have built technology stack for these three main actors, which were sort of those large building blocks that I mentioned before. Essentially somebody that can hold the underlying base layer of money, somebody that can act as a minter, ideally bring in their utility, their use case to the network, and somebody that can be a third-party validator to say that everybody's doing what they claim they're doing. We have built extensive technology for all of these things. So these are actual screenshots of what we call the modules that we offer for minters joining the network, the modules that we offer validators such as Chronicle to join the network and look through reserve instruments and say that the money is actually where people claim that the money is, or for asset managers to actually manage a portfolio of the underlying and provide collaboration and orchestration and proof that those underlying assets are there, to enabling minters to mint a fungible stablecoin. So that's what we're trying to do. We have recently launched. If you are building a stablecoin, I would highly recommend don't go it alone. You're going to spend a lot of money trying to gain traction and adoption and seek utility. Join a federation instead. Benefit from the work that the network does for you. Thank you.
M0, everyone. That is, I've been to a lot of stablecoin conferences. That is the most structured presentation I've ever seen in my life. If I can give you one recommendation, Joao, you need to write a book called Stablecoin Mental Models, and I would read that. You're very, very, very good at structuring the information.